job they do and also business opportunities. And you will have a chance to, at the end of all the presentations, you will have a chance to ask questions to those experts and discuss more about the sector operations in ADB. So I suggest we start with all presentations first, and then the Q&A session will open up. Maybe without further ado, I just want to invite our first speaker to the stage. Laitora is our principal public sector specialist working for the PSNG sector office. The mic is yours.
Great, thank you, Matt. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name, as Matt said, is Laitora. I'm a principal public specialist with ADB's Public Sector Management and Governance Sector Group, or PSMG as we're more commonly known. On behalf of the team, including our colleague from ADB's Financial Management and Procurement Department, I'd like to welcome you all to this session and also to convey our appreciation for you being here this afternoon. One of the reasons we appreciate this opportunity is so that we can highlight or explain a bit more about what we do, who we do it for, and to try and shape the kind of engagement we would like to have with you. If you were to take away any message from this particular session, it would be that we value you as service providers, but I think beyond that, we would like to see you also as strategic partners. And so that's the sort of framework or the theme for the presentations that you'll see this afternoon. So Asia and the Pacific is a region of remarkable transformation, resilience, and ambition. And as many of you know, over the past decade, we've seen governments rise to meet extraordinary challenges, from the pandemic recovery to climate change, from debt management to public service delivery. Behind every successful reform, there's a story of partnership. And one of the things that we would like to do this afternoon is showcase PSMG and what it does, but also the opportunities that we would like to offer for businesses like yours. So a bit about PSMG and what we do. We're ADB's lead sector group for macroeconomic and fiscal policy, governance reforms, and institutional strengthening. We work across 36 of ADB's developing member countries, supporting governments to build strong, resilient, and inclusive public institutions. Our work is anchored in policy financing, so perhaps many of you will be familiar with our policy-based lending programs, but it goes far beyond financing. We integrate deep policy dialogue, technical assistance, and knowledge solutions, and we rely on expert partners such as yourselves to help us deliver. This matters because between 2019 and 2024, PSMG supported over $31 billion in operations. Nearly 40% of that was crisis response support during COVID, but the rest focused on long-term reforms. So tax modernization, debt sustainability, SOE reform, and digital governance, and more. 35% of these operations were in Southeast Asia, 30% in Central and West Asia, 20% in South Asia, and the remainder in the Pacific region. So PSMG's portfolio accounts for around a quarter of ADB's total sovereign lending commitments. We're also scaling up. ADB's balance sheet went through some reforms a couple of years ago, and the result of that is annual sovereign commitments are expected to grow by 50% over the next decade. What this means in practice is more projects, more TA, and more demand for specialized expertise. So essentially what we're looking for are partners who can help us to deliver in the following areas. And as I mentioned before, we're not only seeing you as service providers. What we'd like to see is a meeting of values and interests and a more strategic partnership so that we're able to deliver across the broad range of strategic partnerships in the reform areas that are highlighted on screen. Our engagement with businesses like yours is structured, strategic, and evolving. As I mentioned, we deploy TA, we support communities of practice, and increasingly, as you will hear from Ali, Mahabani, and Matt, we integrate your expertise, not only in our support for our upstream reforms, so policy and institutional reforms, but downstream interventions as well. So within the sector group, we're seeing an increasing number of project investments, sector development programs, which are a combination of policy reforms and project investments, and results-based lending, or in the World Bank language, program for results operations. So what a great example of the kinds of products that this partnership that we're seeking from you can help produce are these what we call GMAP assessments. So these essentially are an assessment of country systems, institutions, laws, and policies to identify where gaps and weaknesses are in the governance systems of the countries where ADB has an engagement. So in the 36 DMCs where we provide some form of financing. And as you see, when you look at the specific areas that are covered under these assessments, these are quite comprehensive areas in themselves. And so they require the kind of expertise, insights, innovation, and commitment that you can bring. And so I hope that this is an area that will pique your interest and lead to more conversations about how we can develop this partnership further. So I'll end here and I'll pass over to my colleague Ali to talk more about our knowledge work. Thank you.
Thank you, Lai. At PSMG, we're aiming to build a holistic knowledge and solutions portfolio that spans all regions and connects to our public sector management thematic areas and weaves them with sector operations. And to make that happen, we're making sure our knowledge products and knowledge solutions and services are not just informative, but they're directly tied to how we do programmatic approaches, reform areas, and projects. The idea is to embed knowledge into everything that we do, drawing from real project experiences, results, and lessons, and creating out of those experiences real, practical, innovative, and impactful knowledge solutions and services. So this is where we come in at PSMG. We're a team called Strategy, Emerging Areas, and Knowledge. And we work in 4 work streams. The first of which my colleague Lai has already spoken about, and that is the GMAPs, or the country diagnostics. And he will be discussing another work stream later on emerging areas. And I will be discussing knowledge management and solutions and the Asia Pacific Tax Hub. So each of these 4 work streams require specialized consulting services to achieve our goals. For the knowledge solutions, we work hand in hand with our operations group as well as with regional teams to cover all regions and to make sure that we're using knowledge in smart and impactful ways. We weave innovative and integrated knowledge solutions into sector work across different regions. So that means, in a very practical sense, we're not just doing projects or implementing projects, but we're also learning improving and sharing knowledge as we go along. Most of our knowledge products and events revolve around a few key themes. And these are, the first one is governance and public financial management systems. It can also be climate responsive PFM systems, subnational governance strengthening, SOE reforms, digital transformation in governance and digitization, public investment management, and domestic resource mobilization and international tax cooperation. For the other work stream, the Asia-Pacific Tax Hub, this serves as a regional, pan-regional platform on domestic resource mobilization and international tax cooperation. It provides an open, inclusive, and pan-regional platform for policy dialogue, knowledge sharing with partners, and collaboration and coordination with development partners. In a nutshell, some of the activities that the Asia-Pacific Tax Hub has done are knowledge sharing, capacity building, conferences, tax diagnostics and assessments, and hand-holding also with government on assessing their tax administration systems. So these are the work streams that I work on, and I will turn over to my colleague, James Webb.
Thank you, Alice. Alice Eskander was our public sector officer from the PSMG office. So she didn't introduce herself. So, and Lai and Ali was explaining overview of their sector strategy and emerging areas and knowledge products they are engaged in. So it was quite insightful. Thank you. So we will move to the next speaker, James. You introduce yourself.
Sure.
Thank you.
So my name is James Webb. I'm a senior public sector economist here at the bank. I work in two very diverse regions, and there's, on the surface, very little commonality between Southeast Asia and the Pacific, but that's the region that I work in. So what I'm going to go through here today is sort of like, I guess, some of the common areas between the two regions. There's over 22 countries in these two regions, so presenting specific examples would have us run the extreme spectrum of PSMG's work. So please, we're here for the rest of today and tomorrow. If you're interested, please come up and ask us so we can provide more information. Okay, so in forming our policy-based loans, I think Lai and Ali have done a good job of kind of cutting across all of our knowledge areas and topics that we work with. But when it comes to budget support operations, we're really talking about consistent delivery of technical assistance for a number of years that builds to a budget support operation. So the technical assistance really is the lifeblood of our budget support. So those billions of dollars that we've mobilized depends on the technical support provided to partner governments and also the partner government reform programs themselves. So in Southeast Asia and the Pacific, common areas of policy work around governance, of course. But one thing that people forget is that most Southeast Asian countries and Pacific countries are very dispersed. Right? They're dispersed populations, usually separated by mountains, jungles, or oceans. And that creates common governance challenges. How do you deliver services for remote communities? How do you make sure that the public sector doesn't just focus on needs of urban centres and services the whole country? And that's a common challenge, whether you're the Philippines with its thousands of islands, or whether you're Fiji with its thousands of islands. Digitalization is becoming more and more important, and this is one of the areas where project finance has really grown over the past 5 or 6 years. We've seen more and more digitalization programs for financial management information systems, revenue systems, public payroll, HRMIS systems, and of course AI. This stems from some of the challenges that come from governance for small and remote communities, but of course when you're in big polities as well, efficiency is obviously key for that. So it can service both of these aims, which is no surprise. We're working very close with our ICT colleagues on this, but usually the driver comes from ministries of finance and public sector agencies rather than the technology. Public finance, of course, is the bread and butter. One of the common areas is domestic resource mobilization. And again, the Southeast Asia and Pacific region have the full gamut of countries that have 10% or lower revenue to GDP performance. At the other end, you've got Pacific Island countries pushing 27, 28% of GDP for revenue collection. And you've also got a very different mix of economies, right? But one of the common elements is that they really do have limited fiscal space and generally speaking have volatile revenue sources. Even those based on private sector economies typically have narrow economic bases. Of course, the exceptions are in Southeast Asia, much bigger economies, much more diversified and much more plugged into global networks. And then, of course, environment. So environment and exposure to disasters has seen almost every country now exploring disaster risk financing options. We're providing TA across the board through PSMG, but also through other sector groups as well, in climate change finance. But in terms of the PSMG involvement, it really is one of the key, the principal fiscal risks that faces both regions. Right? Almost all countries in the regions are exposed to cyclones, in particular, cyclones and typhoons, flooding events, rainfall events. And again, you come back to that problem of disparate communities spread across large areas. How do you effectively mobilize finance? How do you effectively get assistance to where it's needed? How do you finance the infrastructure adaptation that's needed? And that's it from my side. So I've tried to keep it nice and short because I know there's a few presenters in front of me. But I really just want to highlight that a lot of people who work in Southeast Asia don't work in the Pacific. And I think that that's perhaps a mistake from our behalf of not trying to get more people to work in the Pacific region, but also people who tend to work in similar economies in Southeast Asia have a lot of lessons the Pacific can learn from, and vice versa. So there is a lot of cross-pollination that can happen, and a lot of the issues are exactly the same. How to run a revenue system, how to run a public financial management system, how to effectively digitalize. And actually, if I was to advocate strongly, the interface between ADB, our consultants, and governments, particularly in the Pacific region, is much, much closer than it is in Southeast Asia. The hierarchies are much smaller. You have a lot more of a, sandbox approach where people can throw ideas around. You can get the entire Ministry of Finance leadership team in a single room and hash out a plan of attack and walk out and talk directly to the desk officer, right? I work in the Philippines as well. It's a very different environment, right? It's very formalized, very hierarchical. Agencies don't like talking to each other. It's a very different working environment. But that being said, both are equally exciting for different reasons. So please talk to us more, and if you've got questions in this session, obviously happy to take them. Thanks.
Thank you, James. Maybe people may ask further questions later on, so the differences, etc., was quite interesting to hear from the differences and similarities working across the different regions, right? Although there are a lot of common approaches in the sector. So let me invite our next speaker, Mohamed Baboif, for his presentation. He is our public sector management and governance from the office, public sector specialist. So you can introduce yourself a little more.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mohamed Baboif, public sector specialist, and also in charge of the portfolio administration within South Asia. Thank you for joining us today at Business Opportunities Fair. Our sector group manages a robust pipeline of programs and non-lending products across 6 countries in South Asia, from Bangladesh, India, Maldives, Sri Lanka to Nepal, and Maldives and India. So if we look at that indicative amount of our pipeline for 2025 to 2027, it exceeds $2.4 billion US, averaging over 800 million annually. Beyond financing, we deliver also knowledge products and services, and that's because we are not only proposing those reforms that are needed in our developing member countries, but also providing knowledge solution through technical support. And if we look at that pipeline of non-lending products and services, we call this way the technical assistance. This is the projected amount will reach 12.6 million US dollars over this period, or roughly 4.2 million per year. Today, I would like to share. Today, I would like to share some programs and projects that make significant difference improving livelihoods of people across the countries. Let me first highlight the program that we recently approved and committed in Bangladesh. This was on the programmatic approach through policy-based lending program, and that demand for this program was triggered by the fact that Bangladesh has been facing the very challenging climate-related disasters, and that's why we wanted to build resilience and the climate, to facilitate climate financing, mainly through climate adaptation and climate mitigation. Throughout our program, which total amount exceeds 800 million US dollars spread over 2 sub-programs, it is complemented by 1.5 million technical assistance, which are needed, for example, for implementation of those reforms that the government of our partner government from Bangladesh has been committed to implement. The goal of our program was a just transition to a sustainable, resilient, and inclusive low-carbon economy, and we are strengthening climate resilience and reducing emissions in climate-critical sectors by creating an enabling environment for climate actions, reinforcing adaptation and mitigation in Bangladesh. For example, you can access the page of this program through the QR code, and particularly I will encourage you to take a look at the T8 paper, which consists of the terms of reference of expected consultants that are needed, and you accordingly may prepare and apply for those assignments once announced. Next case is related with Tripura, which requires a robust industrial infrastructure to unlock its manufacturing potential, generate employment, and drive regional growth. We are advancing the Tripura Industrial Infrastructure Development Project with an $85.4 million loan that was recently approved by ADB board. This initiative enhances manufacturing competitiveness, diversifies products, creates jobs, and fosters regional cooperation in India. We are strengthening institutional mechanisms throughout our program, building climate resilient and gender responsive environments, and developing and upgrading in industrial estates. This is in Tripura. And the last program that I wanted to highlight today is the forthcoming trade expansion and diversification program in Bhutan, which aims to diversify its trade and strengthen regional integration, both of which are vital for economic stability and private sector growth. Our trade expansion and diversification program is again on the programmatic approach, consisting of 2 programs at $25 million each. And together with these programs, we are also proposing a technical assistance at the amount nearly $1 million US dollars, which will be implemented, which will be utilized for implementation of reforms needed under this program. These initiatives present significant opportunities for partnership and collaboration with consulting firms, think tanks, and other stakeholders. I look forward together with our team for collaboration and your active engagement in these programs. If you have any questions or you need any clarification, please feel free to reach out. We will be happy to provide additional information as needed. With that, let me hand over back to my colleagues. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mohammadi. So interesting to hear some real project cases from the region. So Lies, back to the podium for CW region, right? Operations. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. So, ladies and gentlemen, one of the important pieces of feedback we received over previous sessions, or the last few years anyway, is to try and make these presentations less transactional and a bit more engaging and a bit more exciting, so that you get a better sense of what our values are as well, rather than just the pipeline, which is, for those of you familiar with these sessions, you've probably seen in the past. So with James, you get a picture of the strategic sort of framework for our engagement in Southeast Asia and the Pacific. With Mohammadi, a bit more of a deep dive into the kinds of work that we do, the specific reforms that we help the governments to implement. So I thought what we could do for Central and West Asia is look at a case study of country XYZ and talk really about how we can bring forward this meeting of transaction and values, or as I mentioned earlier, moving beyond service delivery to more of a strategic partnership. So this particular case, this particular country, and the case study, I beg your pardon, focuses on state-owned enterprise reforms and the country's efforts to restructure and commercialize its commercial SOEs. For all the reasons that you can imagine, and for many of you are probably aware with the challenges that countries face in trying to transform their SOEs. Things like limited government ownership, lack of coordination between partners, fragmented sector approaches. But the result of that is even more alarming, right? We know that they're a drag on overall economic productivity. They lead to increased business and investment costs. They put increasing pressure on the government's fiscal position. They lead to high levels of debt, contingent liabilities, and so on and so forth. And in the case of this particular country, ADB's had a few attempts at supporting these reforms over the last three or so decades, with not much to show for it, frankly speaking. We have other development partners who are involved, but they've since pulled out of this particular space. And so a couple of years ago, this country's under an IMF program. They asked ADB to come in to see whether we might be able to reinvigorate some of the reforms in this particular space or in this particular sector, given that there was a new government and that there was a political appetite to do something to address these long-standing issues. And so what we needed to focus on was a combination of upstream reforms. And by that I mean looking at establishing an overarching law to cover the SOEs. There needed to be a policy framework to ensure that there was consistency in the overall policy direction, to ensure that various implementing agencies or partners within this space were pulling together. And there needed to be also restructuring and commercialization, and if it came down to it, privatization as well, even though the privatization experience hadn't been a successful one in the past. But what was needed then, given these challenges and given the areas that needed to be reformed, was a combination of not only the way that ADB goes about providing this support, and by that I mean technical assistance and financing, but a deeper dive into the specific reasons why these challenges had not been addressed. It's very easy to say political economy, but surely there are other things other weaknesses and gaps that could be addressed to help at least bring about some traction in the reforms that the government wishes to implement. So there's business opportunities available in these kinds of cases, clearly. And I mentioned the GMAP assessment that also highlighted SOE reform as a priority for reform in this particular country. There's a need for diagnostic work to untangle what seems to be multiple layers of constraints and challenges. There needs to be technical assistance, not only in the preparation of the program itself, but in the implementation of the reforms that are needed. A significant amount of handholding. And there needs to be support for the reform implementation itself. And in this particular case, we're not just talking about upstream reforms, as I mentioned, but also investment activities. Activities that are focused more on achieving results rather than just investments in themselves. So you can see there's a wide scope of specific areas where consultancy firms, think tanks, academic institutions can get involved, from knowledge, diagnostic assessments, preparing the reforms, implementing the reforms. And in this case, because it's a results-based loan, or P4R, we need an independent verification agency. And what we're seeing is that the big four audit firms are also expressing an interest for that particular role. Clearly, I guess the message we're trying to convey is that there are a range of projects and programs that we're involved in the PSMG. You've heard about the budget support operations. Mohammed highlighted them in his presentation, but we're also, as I mentioned earlier, increasingly moving towards project investments and results-based loans. And for those of you who are familiar with it, it means that there are more opportunities to get involved across the different areas that I've highlighted. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Lai. Thank you.
And then just
another interesting example.
Sorry.
Please move on.
Yeah, and just to, I guess, conclude the PSMG part of the presentation before we pass on to our colleague from our Financial Management and Procurement Department. We have our sort of long-standing traditional areas of reform where we play a role in supporting governments to try and address these. And then we have areas that are, emerging as new challenges emerge, as new risks emerge. And the slide in front of you just provides a bit of a flavor about the kinds of things that you could be helping us with. And as I mentioned, not only in terms of knowledge and diagnostic and analytical work, but in the actual delivery of some of the reforms that the countries more and more are asking ADB to help them with. So as James mentioned, we'd be more than happy to go into a lot more detail about these opportunities. We haven't shown you the long list of the lending pipeline for 2025 to 2027, but these will be available as part of the slide deck, right, Mark?
Yeah, we have a QR code for screening the pipeline projects from the sector.
Right.
So we can show it later on.
Great. So please have a look at those. We'd be more than happy to discuss them. But please just don't restrict yourself to those. As I mentioned, there are other opportunities that are always emerging, and we'd be more than happy to have these conversations with you. So let me stop here, and I'll hand over to my colleague Maria to conclude this particular session with her presentation.
Thank you, Lai. So it was another exciting, we heard another exciting real case of the project in operation in the CWRD region, where the SOE reform and other public sector reforms are being addressed, and how it is challenging. We can see, region to region. So now let's keep the questions to the end, as I said. But now we want to invite Maria Keisler. She is Principal Financial Management Specialist from Procurement, Portfolio and Financial Management Department of ADB. Welcome, Maria. Yeah, it will appear now. Yeah, it is there. So that will be our final presentation before we open the floor for Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you at ADB Business Opportunities Fair. My topic today is one that cuts across every single project the bank finances. It's not as glamorous than other projects and programs that were indicated here, but it's very much needed. And I'm talking about the topic of financial management and fiduciary management in our projects. So it might sound technical or boring, but at its heart, it's about one single idea: making sure that public money, and of course ADB money, is used for its intended purpose, delivers results, and builds trust. And here's the truth: there is no ADB project without fiduciary work. And your expertise as accountants, auditors, analysts, and financial specialists is indispensable. So ADB finances over $30 billion every year. We have an average of 120 projects that we prepare every year. And we have 700 active projects. And this is in all the sectors. So behind every bridge, hospital, and renewable energy plant, there's a fiduciary backbone that ensures that funds are well managed. And this is where financial management comes into play. So opportunities lie in all the project cycle. Is not a one-off exercise. It spans the entire project cycles, and consultants, individual firms are needed at every stage. So we are talking about project preparation and design. Usually this happens, ADB recruits consultants, consulting firms to help us identify country, agency, project FM needs, working with the implementing agencies, and we are talking about the Ministry of Transport, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Highways, and we go and check what are the needs. Are the systems of those agencies robust? Can we use those systems in our projects? And I'm talking about what? I'm talking about the accounting system. I'm talking about internal control processes, procedures, the staff capacity. So we do that diagnostic, and we assess together with consultants, consulting firms, how robust, how ready are those systems for our projects, and not only for ADB funds, but also for public funds in general. So there is here a capitalization, a leveraging aspect. And finally, we, of course, prepare the project documents and indicate in cases where there is no capacity at the agency level, we ring fence. We require consultants, consulting firms to do that fiduciary work. And I'm talking about doing the accounting for the project, preparing statements of expenditures, doing the controls, processes, verification, doing the internal audit, preparing reports. Doing the external audit, we need private audit firms, because many times the supreme audit institution of the country does not have the capacity. So there's the agency project ring fencing. While at the same time, we would ask some consultants, consulting firms to help us strengthen the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Transport, processes, procedures, capacity, so they can manage better public funds in general. So that's project design. Once the project is approved, during implementation, we engage consultants, of course, to help set up the funds flow arrangements, reporting mechanisms, internal control processes, manuals, systems, software. So all of the spectrum that is needed for having good financial management systems and arrangements. We also then have the project completion and beyond. So we build the road is there, but there is the need to maintain that road for 20 years, right, to generate the economic benefits. So we count on consultants to also help us ensure that there is enough sustainability of the agencies that will receive or maintain those assets. So I'm talking all of those wonderful SOEs sometimes, right? Those even local bodies that need to maintain those roads. Are they sufficiently capacitated to maintain the roads? So an analysis in terms of the sustainability of financial sustainability of those assets that are being built. So a lot of opportunities in the project cycle, and consultants are essential. Consultants, consulting firms are essential at each stage. So it's not a single off situation. And then we come to the expertise that we are in demand. And that, of course, is related to financial management. That's what I'm talking about here. So we are talking about accounting and auditing. We do need expert accountants. We know, for example, that Filipinos are very good accountants. We know that there is this possibility of Filipino accountants to travel in Asia and the Pacific and deliver services everywhere. So there is this free circulation of accountants. So that's also good. So we need your help in designing project accounting systems, agency accounting system, like to put the accounts in order in those ministries. We, of course, need your help doing the project accounting and auditing, so private audit firms that can help us with that. Conducting the audit which is aligned with international standards, build the capacity of even the countries, the supreme institution, the professional accounting organizations in some cases that we work with in terms of building that capacity of professional accountants. Financial analysis, financial analysts we need. We need to model the sustainability of the investments. We need to conduct analysis in terms of cost recovery, financial analysis of SOEs, the going concern. It's always a problem that exists to ensure that they are going to continue in the long term. Analyzing, of course, the financial risks. Capacity building. So it's not just to do the project, support the project, but then build the capacity of the agency, of the line ministry to have in the future, be able to do the rest of the work, right? If they have an accounting software that through our project, we build that accounting software, they need to be able to keep the accounts in order. We have, of course, the systems development. So we are talking about the adaptation of those financial management information systems. Sometimes we have the country, the GIFMIS, the IFMIS, right, country level, but not always those country systems are used by the agency. How can we ensure that there is the use by the agency of those systems producing reliable financial information? And of course, integrating, strengthening the internal controls, processes, manuals, okay? So this is not a narrow field. This is a wide spectrum of opportunities cutting across every sector and every project. Remember, 120 projects are prepared annually in ADB, and billions of dollars, $30 billion, we say, or more. And all the projects, they do need a consultant, a consulting firm, not only to do the work for the project implementation unit, but also to build that capacity and those systems at the agency level. So some examples, just some examples. Easily, you can go do a Google search, procurement plans, ADB, and there you have all the procurement plans. In the procurement plans, you can do a search keywords, financial management, audit, accounting. And so I did a couple of them just for curiosity. And we can see those are just now in September were uploaded in our procurement plan page. And we have this one in PNG, and there we go. And we see financial management specialist, an international consultant is needed in PNG if someone wants to apply. Okay, in Q3 2025, it will appear hopefully in CMS. We have a page, so you can search also and put your resume there, so you can find that. We have this in Lao, Water Supply and Sanitation Sector Project, External Financial Audit for fiscal year 25 and 26. We have here in Kolkata, India, internal audit. A firm is needed in Kolkata Corporation. So this is some examples of things that easily you can search for in the procurement plans, in the CMS, and it's, again, not as large as doing a big program, but it is needed, very much needed in all of our projects. So more information, please, I encourage you to explore all of these opportunities. Connect with us during the fair. We have a table there on financial management. We have regional focals, FM. We have country people, financial management, ADB. So we have a QR code in our table, and you can go and have a one-on-one meeting. So please do come to us, and we'll be happy to discuss with you and show you some of the wonderful opportunities that we have for accountants and auditors and financial analysts in our ADB operations. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria. So this was about the ADB's FM fiduciary work we are involved, which is involved in all of our projects. So you heard the opportunities and how to find the information. And then for PSMG sector operations as well, we also heard their approach, emerging areas, and then the different diagnostics, reform operations, TA operations, and different instruments, PPLs, etc. So all information is available either through ADB's webpage, procurement plans, as well as this link will directly bring you to those pipeline projects also from the sector, okay? And also we have, as Maria mentioned, we have a special table and booths for both, areas on the more detailed of information on those operations and pipeline projects. Okay, so now thank you. First of all, another applaud. Let's give an applaud to our wonderful speakers. Before I start, let's start the floor for Q&A. And we have the two mics in between, so you guys can come to the mic with your questions. Please identify yourself when you ask questions, and also you can also mention who you want to answer your questions. And plus another mood for sending your question is application. We have BOF live Q&A application. You can also send your questions through that application in your mobile phone, so we will see your questions. So, floor is open. Please go ahead.
I'm Joel Tantores, previously the Dean of the UP Business School and formerly BIR Commissioner. I'd like to ask or probably make a suggestion about the Asia Pacific Tax Hub, now which was discussed a while back. It's a good idea. OECD, of course, is the leading global tax or organization involved in research and other activities on tax and domestic resource mobilization. I follow the Asian Tax or Asia Pacific Tax Hub since it was formed about 5 years ago. I hope it reached the stature and accomplishment of even probably 50% of OECD. Now, so I'd like to know how can probably the tax hub move forward towards coming up with that objective, no? Improving essentially the Asian tax hub, Asia Pacific tax hub, to come up with more projects, conferences, etc., to at least, again, attain what OECD tax has done in the past years. Thank you.
Very much. So who want to take the, James? You, oh, okay, Ali.
Thank
Please
you.
go.
So maybe I can answer that and then give the floor to Lai. OECD has been a very good partner to us, and the way we approach that partnership is we don't see it as a competition, but we see it as collaboration between us and OECD. There's so much space for us to intervene for tax. And where OECD has a strong presence, that's where OECD can work on those areas. And where OECD does not have as strong as a presence as us, that's where we work. And so our relationship with OECD has always been collaborative in nature. And we bring them in, or they bring us in also where there is a lack in capacity, or where there are gaps that need to be filled.
Thank you very much, Ali. And just to add, sir, that I think increasingly we're seeing more demand from our DMCs now that the APTH has been up and running for some time. There's a lot more awareness about what it does, what it can do, what it can deliver, and also the range, and in terms of what it can deliver, the range of different kinds of support that it can provide, from the these startups, for example, to assessments on digital tax. We have a number of these projects in the Philippines and in other countries where we're supporting digital tax administration and compliance and into international tax treaties. And so, we are seeing also an increase in the demand and request for support from the tax hub. And I think that's also helping us to achieve some of the benchmarks that we've set for the APTH. Thank you.
Thank you, Lai and Ali. So more questions? Please go ahead to the mic. Thank you.
Very tall. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for shedding light on this topic. I'm representing VNG International, which is the international agency of the Dutch Municipal Association. Deriving from this organization, I can't help but ask you also, when you're talking about governance and capacity strengthening, also of the capacities of the government to absorb basically all of the tasks that they need to do in a mandate that falls below them, to what extent is also the local government realm of governance a focus in your projects? Because I could see more focus on a national level rather than on a local level, but it could also be maybe just this, more focus on the national level. So I was wondering whether you could maybe shed some light on this. I saw some reference in the financial aspect to the municipal project related to an audit that needs to take place, but in the wider discussion, I'm missing sometimes a little bit this component. So maybe whoever wants to take up this one.
The subnational level governance and capacity.
Yeah, it is a challenge, right? And I think this is where knowing the challenges of specific countries makes obviously a big difference in customizing the approach, because what works in one country is not necessarily going to work in another. But also the governance structures can differ massively between the authority that local governments have, what municipal services they're responsible for. In the Philippines, you've got a decentralized tax system as well, with the regional tax offices have authority to collect taxation, but they're still part of BAR as a central agency. So it can have some quite complex governance arrangements. So there's not a one-size approach. I'd say we are working with, I mean, I've given examples in the Philippines, working with BIR and BLGF, Bureau of Local Government, finance on decentralization and execution of revenue policy at a local level. But then you've also got the decentralization programs in South Asia as well. And then in the Pacific, the delivery of basic services to remote communities. You know, the central governments might be really strong. That's debatable in some countries, but you know, capacity is a real challenge, right? You're dealing with very small communities by that point who have their own agency as local governments. So trying to find out how do you get a local government of 30 people to deliver services to an island of 700, 800 people in the remote Pacific is exceptionally challenging, right? And I think this is a challenge that not even developed countries have sorted out. So there's very few sort of examples that we can draw on to say this is good practice in one place, we can apply it here, right? It doesn't really work like that. But one of the things that I really encourage, and sorry I didn't catch your name, but having agencies in developed countries, or people who have worked with agencies in developed countries, or countries that have very strong, regional governments, taking some of that expertise and the skills, and then localizing it to a particular context. This is sort of the exciting stuff for me, right? It's sort of, you're at the frontier because you're taking those skills and knowledge and applying it. What I didn't get to raise before was two points. One is that our technical assistance in Southeast Asia and the Pacific, and increasingly in other regions as well, is becoming pan-regional. So typically we'll source the skills and then try and find the fit, for the countries that we work in. And the other thing is that they're becoming longer-tailed. So rather than being write a policy document, hand it over to government, it gets a PBL tick, they get the budget support, and we leave. The TA tends to stick around for maybe 2 or 3 years in helping our implementation support. And what we find is actually you get second and third round reforms and capacity building programs, train the trainer programs, because you need that capacity, especially for local governments, right, who don't have the depth to have their own L&D programs or induction programs or recruitment from national agencies. So yeah, great question.
Thank you.
Sorry, could I just add to that by saying you would have heard about the restructure that ADB has undertaken and the fact that the different sector groups are meant to be collaborating. So this cross-collaboration as well is leading to more attention at the subnational level. Our colleagues from the transport sector, energy sector are coming to us and saying, listen, we're doing a lot of work with the municipal authorities, but we need financial management, capacity shored up, procurement, and things like that. So you also need to be focusing your attention there. So there's more of this happening and some more opportunities as well. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. So next question.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm James. I'm from Rebel, a PPP and infrastructure finance advisor. So the question is for mainly for Lai and James. So it's around, so in the past, DMCs have been seeking support around developing more innovative vehicles to finance infrastructure projects, either because of fiscal constraints, as I think in the countries that Lai mentioned, or for example in the Philippines, where they're looking at more for efficiency and transparency of delivery of infrastructure projects. So I'm wondering whether, because I didn't see that feature too much in the discussions, I was wondering whether ADB is seeking to continue supporting these types of setting up these initiatives or providing either capacity or financing for such vehicles, such as infrastructure funds or other blended finance mechanisms to deliver infrastructure. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Another great question. And I think it not only touches on, PPPs and other sort of procurement instruments like PPPs, but also in terms of the growing interest by countries in being able to mobilize financing for climate change adaptation and mitigation. So there's more and more of a call to ensure that whatever work's being undertaken in the public sector management space has a clear linkage to the sort of downstream activities that our private sector colleagues are also focused on. So they still remain a large part of the PSMG's portfolio, but we tend to focus more on the upstream side, where we're looking to review and reform the legislative framework, the regulatory framework, ensure that there's a policy in place that ensures that PPP contracts aligned to national priorities, fiscally prudent and well structured and things like this. But then there's also a follow-on then to our colleagues who look after PPPs and private sector, where they're brought in to ensure that the next part of these PPP investments materialize, which is the transactions. And then on the climate side, of course, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done on ensuring countries are able to identify the fiscal risks posed by climate change, or improving resilience in their countries. And that sort of foundation type of work is taking up a lot of our time and effort right now, with a view to making sure that we're able to then provide the country with the instruments that they need to be able to secure more private interest and private financing. James?
No, look, I think Lai have pretty much covered the areas I would have touched on. I'd probably say that the one thing, again, that comes back to is that some countries need to walk before they can run, right? And so the governance frameworks upstream, become incredibly important, but as does the capacity of the agents who are implementing, the rules and regulations or the policies that are put in place. And ensuring that there's adequate separation between the PPP agency or the governance agency making the decisions and the projects themselves, right? So there's a bit of a separation, and that can be challenging, right? Particularly because it's usually politically exposed, right? In this area, you start delving into the structure of government and the way decisions are made. It can be quite tricky. But no, in terms of the support, what Lai's mentioned is spot on. There's opportunities at the upstream for TA, and then through the execution process for both due diligence, capacity building for the agency, and of course the PPPs and other vehicles themselves.
Could I just have a quick clarification? So thanks for the answer, which is quite comprehensive in PPP. So I was wondering specifically around vehicles like national infrastructure funds or regional or sovereign wealth funds. Yeah.
Sure. Mohammed may have some on this as well. The answer is yes, but it varies greatly by country. So I think sovereign wealth funds for those resource-rich economies, for those that don't have sovereign wealth funds already, is an area that we've worked on, particularly sort of more in the emerging economies. So you're looking at sort of Timor, Nauru, Cooks, Kiribati, those sorts of countries where they either have sovereign wealth fund frameworks that need to be improved, or are quite young in terms of the general scheme of things. Mixed bonds and those sorts of things, infrastructure funds with co-payments or green bonds is another area that we can probably talk more about. But I'm more skeptical on that side, because for me it comes down to cost of finance, right? If bond issuances and creative vehicles only make sense where it reduces the cost or increases the availability of finance for the governments. So there's a tension there between expanding rapidly and doing things well, I guess. How many of you?
So guys, I'm a little bit cautious about the time, but
okay,
Mohammed,
very
please,
briefly on Wells fund management. In one of our DMCs, ADB, through the technical assistance, has been providing support for the Sovereign Wealth Fund in terms of increasing its governance and transparency, and also enhancing its operational efficiency to make sure that the Sovereign Wealth Fund will meet its mandate and should not be tapped on a recurrent base, only during external shocks or some exogenous events. And for that, we supported them and prepared a methodology that allows them to assess projects of national significance to ensure the effectiveness and efficiency of their investments. So this is just one example how ADB has been engaged in sovereign wealth management in one of our DMCs.
Thank you, colleagues. So for the interest of the time, I just want to extend for another 5 minutes, although our scheduled time is already over, but we received the 3 questions through the applications, and I want to read them and ask my colleagues answer them in a very short term, okay? And then definitely our experts will answer those questions in the application, in the apps, in more detail. And then you can also schedule one-on-one meetings, or you can go to the booths for more detailed information on the sector. So let me read the first question. Ina is asking, are there any plans to provide technical assistance to the Department of Health in the Philippines? Yes or no? So the Pacific is James. The third is James.
Yes.
Okay, so then, Ina, as we said, you just check our website for Philippine country operations, and then you will find the information and opportunities, procurement plan. So let's move on. Joel is asking, can the tax hub reach the stature accomplishment of OECD tax? I think that was the same question was already answered. And then last question is, yes, the answer is yes. How does the ADB integrate political analysis and adaptive management into its governance programming? And how is this experience typically procured? So this is about the governance diagnostic related question. Lai, you want?
Yeah, so the GMAP that I mentioned is essentially ADB's own internal political economy assessment for our DMCs. I should mention that it's specifically for the board, ADB board's eyes only, and the reason for that is they would like an independent assessment of the environment in which ADB is engaging with these countries when projects from that particular country comes before the board for consideration. And so having that more well-developed understanding of these kinds of issues, governance issues, including political economy issues, is always useful for the board. It's never shared with the country. It's specifically for internal use. And then in terms of the opportunities there, we engage consultants to help us to undertake these assessments. Some of it's desk-based, based on existing information and diagnostic assessments out there, but there's also a component which requires stakeholder consultations, the consultations with the relevant authorities. So this year we've done about 9, but next year maybe 1 or 2, but then from 2027 onwards, I think there's a whole list of these GMAPs being produced, especially because they feed into the country partnership strategies that ADB has with our developing member countries. Thank you.
Sorry, Mark, if I could
Yes,
add one
please
point.
go ahead.
I'd say one thing as well that's sort of in the background here is that when we do our procurement, I would say as someone who's procured technical assistance and consultants, having country knowledge is far and above more valuable than technical expertise, right? I think technical expertise is not necessarily going to differentiate one consultant or TA or consulting firm from another unless there's a very big gap, right? But country knowledge and understanding of the environment in which we operate is going to be far more valuable because it shows that you can work with the counterpart. And that's really, in terms of working towards policy reform is often far more important than the technical details. Obviously, then the technical ability needs to be there, but in terms of a differentiating factor, I would say that that's probably the number one thing that I look for.
Yeah, thank you, guys. So this was the last and most important question, in my view, about the governance diagnostics and assessments, which happens in every our DMCs in line with the new country partnership strategy as upstream work. And also, of course, it is long-term engagements and continuous work, as our colleagues mentioned. This is a knowledge of the country and engagement with the reforms, with the future actions, supports, etc. So this is a very broad area of work in PSMG area, and procurement department and FM divisions, as well as our PSMG sector colleagues. We all try to collaborate in those areas and diagnostics and capacity development activities. So you guys can reach out our websites for country partnership strategies and other technical assistance and reform activities, so that we can also engage you in those expertise, in those areas for your expertise. Thank you very much. With that, I want to conclude our session and congratulate all our speakers and you for very active participation in this session. Thank you. Have a good time. Bye-bye.
And sorry, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any suggestions on how we can improve these sessions and the level of engagement we have with you, please share. Thank you.